AI, I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, obviously AI will help improve algorithms. But to what extent? I think it's something that still we need to wait to see what happens.
Hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of the Talking Intentionally podcast. Today we're speaking with Anna George, one of the co-founders of CoWSwap and CoWProtocol. CoWProtocol is one of the most well-known names in the intent solver space. Their exchange, CoWSwap, is known for being able to use intents and solvers to execute trades for users. Today we're so excited to talk to them about intents and how they view this space. Thanks again for your time, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey, Anna, thank you for taking the time to speak with the Axal podcast. How's it going?
Hi, thank you so much for having us on. Really excited to be here.
We're really excited to have you as well. So first question I'd like to ask is we'd love to dive into the origins of CoWSwap from the intents perspective. Do you mind telling me a little bit about CoWSwap's concept of batched auctions?
Yes, for sure. So CoWProtocol essentially went live in May, I think it was 2021. So we are really like at the forefront of leveraging intents for DEX design. And the reason why we started looking into it was really from the perspective of how can we provide a better user experience? Because DeFi has a lot of issues, right? It's great for many things, but it's also risky in the sense that most users don't necessarily know how to do transaction management well. And then there's a lot of risk how they can lose money on the way. And these were issues that we tried to tackle, and we looked into the intent design. And how it works precisely on CoWProtocol is that a user goes simply to the UI, and then very normal experience. The UI actually looks very similar to Uniswap UI and other ones, the ones that you're used to. Picks the buy token, sell token, limit price. And then the difference is in the flow now that instead of crafting a full-on Ethereum transactions, instead they just sign the message. They sign the message here, this is the 2 tokens I want to swap, and this is the limit price I'm willing to swap for. And then what happens is this transaction is broadcasted as well as other transactions that happen in a similar time period and collected in an off-chain order book. And now there is a network of what we call solvers that gets access to this order book and then starts competing on winning the right to execute this order flow. And I think this is something where, I mean, there has been a lot of talks lately about order flow auctions. I think what is really unique about CoWProtocol is the criteria which decides who gets to execute the ultimately the user orders. And here we put the user interest first. It's whoever of the solvers finds the best execution route, best defined as that creates the most surplus for the user, wins the right to then execute the auction, execute like all the transactions that are in the batch. So that's one thing that's outstanding. And the other one, I kind of alluded to it already, is that the solvers don't execute one by one, but actually multiple transactions, all transactions that happen in a similar time frame, can be executed together. They're batched together. And in that way, you can create additional value add for the user. If you, for example, have someone trading ETH for DAI and someone else DAI for ETH, you can match these two orders peer-to-peer. And this way you don't have to pay, for example, the 0.3% Uniswap fee that otherwise you would have to pay if you set it against it. And you don't incur price impact. You don't have to worry that your slippage tolerance is exploited, etc. So yeah, essentially, this is what the solver auction enables. So,
How did
and
how
yes,
did you
sorry,
guys
go
come
ahead.
up with the idea for this? How did you guys hear? When did you first hear of intents and solvers?
That's a really good question. I actually am not even sure. Like it was clearly before I mean, solvers is we invented this, right? Like it didn't exist in that sense before Cow Protocol went live. Like then also other protocols call it differently. Like Uniswap calls it fillers, 1inch calls it resolvers, but they came like 1inch launched over a year, I think a year and a half after Cow Protocol launched, and then Uniswap even later than that. So we were live before Anoma, before anyone else looked into intents. Like the concept of intents already existed, but there was no real on-chain DEX application existing at the time. And yeah, it was really coming from the spirit, like we have been working on DEXs since 2017. But initially, I would say the theory behind the DEXs we launched was great, but not necessarily the execution, the user experience behind it. So that is really we started off with very technical products that were fully decentralized, and then came to the realization, okay, this is not actually how we get user adoption. We need to go back to the drawing board and come up with something that really like make sure that it's a smooth experience for the user. And this is how we started looking into intents.
Did you have any early wins that helped confirm in your head that this is the way you guys should go about creating your architecture?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I think that's a mistake that we did initially, and that probably a lot of like first time founders do, is that the first products we launched, we were working a long time heads down without testing it on the market, and then realizing, okay, we spent months and months and months of resources, and then realized it's not the right product market fit. And then with CoWProtocol, we purposefully launched with a minimal viable product. So I think initially, in a way, like a different way of describing it is that it's also working like a DEX aggregator, like an aggregator of the DEX aggregator. Like you go essentially to a page that gives you access not only to Uniswap Balancer, SushiSwap, Curve, but also additionally gives you access to 1inch, Paraswap, 0x. It tracks everything. But when we launched, it didn't have all these features yet, right? Like it had a really like subset of these features, where I think we initially in the first week of being live only routed to Uniswap. I don't even think we routed to SushiSwap yet. But the USB was the same. It was the intents was really what was at the core front, because for the first time we enabled it that users could, in a way, try to swap risk-free, because since it's in an intent, either the intent doesn't get executed, then the user is not charged anything. They're not wasting any gas fees. And that was actually a really important milestone back in the days, because gas prices were enormous. So you would easily lose $50, $100, sometimes $200 on a transaction. And of course, that is painful if the transaction doesn't even get executed. So that was a real innovation added to the market of, okay, now I can try to execute transactions on chain. If they don't get executed, it was just an intent. I don't have to pay for it. So that USP really hit. We went live within the first week. We had a lot of usage, and it kind of motivated us, okay, now let's build on top of it. Let's add more and more features. Let's add more and more liquidity sources between which we can route, which is another huge USP, because as a normal user, you don't know, or you don't want to have to do the work, or you might not be capable of doing this work of like looking into, okay, there's liquidity on Uniswap, there's liquidity on SushiSwap and on Balancer, and I want to do a trade of $100,000. What is the best way of splitting this across the available on-chain liquidity to make sure that I get the best price in the end? And a user shouldn't have to know how to do this execution right, what is like the different parameters to find out what's my best execution route. And then additionally, also if you do it yourself, you have the risk that you might execute a 20K trade on Uniswap, but then for some other reason, the remaining 80K don't get executed. And then you're stuck with a half-made transaction. So yeah, basically this is another problem that the solver competition solves, and already solved back in the day, that we can now essentially do this work for the user and split up their trades and make sure that whatever underlying liquidity is the best one is where the transaction is routed to.
So Andrea and other folks at CoWSwap have done like a lot of great work on the nuances with auctions and optimizing them. The Axal team actually got a chance to see Andrea speak at DevCon. How do you guys balance the need to like innovate at such deep theoretical levels along with the pains of like having a product that's live and is currently serving users?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say we have like the perfect solution of how to do it right yet, in the sense that, for example, what Andrea presented at DevCon is this approach of combinatorial auctions, which is in a way a sophisticated approach of how we are managing the auctions at the moment. If you want, we can dive down into this in a little bit. But yeah, the point is, how do we balance the innovation versus implementation? This is something that we know how we want to implement it, but we haven't implemented it yet, right? Because it's a question of, there's a lot of other features that we want to go live with soon. So it's a juggling of priorities. I think what is important is that you have a few people in the team that really have dedicated time to look into research, because otherwise there's always so many day-to-day tasks that if you don't actively try to like carve out time to specifically focus on research, you probably won't make as much progress. And I think the other component is that working in DeFi, there's just not just your own innovations, right? But there's so many innovations happening all the time that you just need to spend a chunk of your day also to stay up to date with what everybody else is working on.
Well, kind of a little bit on that note, there's a lot of like centralization concerns when it comes to blockchain order flow in general. But specifically when it comes to like solvers, there's a lot of attention about centralization concerns there. How do you think about this? Like, how does CoWSwap deal with that, that tension that occurs with being both decentralized and having to do things in a centralized manner?
Yeah, I would say when you talk about centralization, the bigger concern that comes to mind is really PBS at the moment, where we essentially just have two block builders that take up the entire block space. But sure, I mean, this is a problem that we always have to think about for any type of protocol we are designing, because if the certain parameters are set a certain way, centralization can become a big risk. In the case of CoWProtocol, I guess I want to answer this in two parts. One is that currently the competition is actually really well distributed. We have around 24 active solvers that are competing. And you need that competition, right? Because you want to make sure that whatever user intent gets into the protocol is executed in the best possible way. And for this, you need this competition that drives the price to the real price that it should be at. Otherwise, there's no incentive for servers to ensure that they execute the user order at the real market value, as they could just try to pocket something for themselves. So you need that competition. The competition, again, on CoWProtocol currently is very open. I think it's also striking how it is compared to 1inch Fusion and Uniswap X. I looked into a comparison table the other day of like how many solvers do we have compared to them. And I think both in 1inch Fusion as well and on Uniswap X, essentially like 90%, 95% of the volume is executed by 3 solvers only. I think the reason for why our competition is more widespread is probably the way we incentivize it. We are the only ones who do a weekly reward payout. So essentially, we look into the execution rate of the solvers, and we look into their performance as to the best winning solver, how much better did they perform compared to the second best solver, also to like ensure actually that they're not starting to just try to penny out each other of like, oh, I'm guessing this one is gonna still pocket a lot of money. Let me just offer 1 more cent and then I will be able to pocket a lot of money. But instead we really look at like the second best price auction, like how much better is the winner compared to the second best, and depending on then they get a better reward. And so Servers have a lot of operational costs. We also saw that servers are like the teams initially they started off having one or two people employed, and now they're like really accelerating and grows, and like some of them have 10 people. And that also, of course, then has a lot of maintenance costs for them and operational costs that need to be covered. And then with the cow rewards, I think they have like a good prediction also based on like how they are performing of knowing what is the rewards that they're going to make. Um, and I think the profitability model, at least from what we have received as feedback from some of our servers, is not that clear on competitor platforms.
In terms of like the future of solvers, do you think AI agents are like this huge topic right now? Do you think the future of solvers is going to be leaning more and more towards AI agents, or do you think it's going to be more market maker slash sophisticated individuals? What do you see like the next step being?
So market makers for sure would underline just they have a lot of inventory. They're really good in doing sex stacks arbitrage and can usually contribute a lot to the competition. And we can see that they have a good edge for certain token pairs. AI, I'm a bit skeptical. I mean, obviously AI will help improve algorithms. But to what extent? I think it's something that still we need to wait to see what happens. Um, of course, you can train them, and then, yeah, but I think I think that's probably the answer. You have to train the algorithms. So, unless something becomes a public good, but if something becomes a public good, you would still want to, of course, train on top of that, make sure that more liquidity resources are integrated. You want to have an edge over who else is in the server competition to make sure that you contribute meaningfully and drive home this profit. Um, so, and then the question is also who is like interested in publishing. Like, I think, of course, there will be some models that everybody has accessibility to, but then you will want to like create an edge on it. And for this, you will still have teams that are like specializing in certain token pairs and certain integrations. That will make sure, that I don't think AI alone will be the solution, but it might be like a combination of the existing server players, market makers, and then leveraging to some extent AI technology.
How do you see more solvers getting into this space? Like, are there incentives going on from people like you and other places in order to get more solvers to create that like level of competition?
Yeah, the interesting part is actually we are overflown with interest from projects, teams, individuals who want to become solvers. Not everybody has the skill set. So we've also seen that like people try to like express interest and then halfway down the line they stop and don't continue. But there's a lot of growing interest currently for sure. And then I would also say, however, it's getting harder. Like back in the days when we launched, it was as simple as, okay, let me fork the API of CoWSwap and then add a few more liquidity sources, maybe a few tweaks, and then I already have a good performing solver. And that's certainly not the case anymore. So it becomes harder to join the competition, but I guess because there's so much hype about intents and generally like this abstraction layer of becoming a solver that more right now a lot of teams are looking into it.
What are your thoughts on like more general purpose intents, like different auction types, generalized solvers? Like the hot take that Axel has is that everything is an intent, and like our goal is to create infrastructure that will host competitive agent auctions for like literally any like human task. What do you think about like that next realm of intents going beyond just current use cases in crypto or being more general?
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question. So, to be honest, I'm a bit skeptical because there's a lot of things that you could theoretically express in intent, but then my question is also where does it really provide a clear benefit? And it's not clear to me in all cases. And then I know it's kind of boring. Everybody uses DEX trading as example for why intents are useful and like what an intent is. So it's a bit of a boring narrative, but it works, right? Like it's clear like you have the issue of MEV. maximum extractable value. You have basically the sophisticated parties that can navigate the trade for you, and like by adjusting even the slippage tolerance on behalf of the user, by making sure potentially using like a private RPC endpoint to submit the order for the user, etc. So it's there the value add to me is really clear. Whereas when you use like a very simple general purpose intent of like buy I don't know, you're probably better positioned to give me an example, and then I can try to criticize it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one that I like is like when it's rain, if it's rainy, then like deliver a croissant and latte to my house or something like that.
That's a no, it's not. It's a prediction market. It's
It's like kind
like
of like you take the prediction market, and then if that case happens, then like actually go and like get DoorDash to like go and deliver actual food to my house.
so, that's actually really interesting. That I think is a good use case. There's actually someone during we participated in a hackathon in Bangkok. Um, and there was a team building kind of this use case on top of us. It was like prediction mark. I don't know. Example probably was related to the U.S. elections. So
Yeah.
everybody was picking on this example lately. So in case that Trump wins, then automatically buy Ether, for example, right? That it's essentially but in a way it's a programmatic order. It's like you want to do a certain action in case a certain event in the future takes place. So it's the automation that I think makes sense because it's really easy for the user, right? And in the end of the day, this is kind of what intents are also about, right? Like they abstract away complexity. They do actions on behalf of a person. And so I think, again, this case is like setting up a programmatic order of if XYZ happens, then execute this. So I think in this case, it makes a lot of sense. I'm still skeptical of like saying for any type of use case of like, oh, just um, buy my ticket. Then there must be a reason why can I not immediately just buy the ticket myself? Like, what is the reason that I want someone else to buy the ticket on my behalf? If there's a reason, then I think it makes sense, but it's not always clear to me that there's a reason.
Yeah, yeah. Well, hey, thanks for confirming my every morning we're coming up with like ideas, intent ideas. And that was mine pretty recently because it started raining in New York and it was so warm for so long. And then after DEF CON, it was finally cold. And I was like, it would be so nice if I could just literally have an intent that was like, the next time it rains, I want to stay in bed and have a croissant and coffee delivered to my apartment instead of having to get up and go get it. But that was the basis for it. But
I
thanks again
guess the
for your
tricky
time, Anna.
part, sorry.
I was saying thanks for your time and we're so happy to work with you. Like everyone at Axel's a huge fan of CoWSwap, so and Cow Protocol. Um,
It's super nice meeting you. Not in person, but online.